Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Baxie's Musical Podcast with my special guest today, Lee Ving from Fear. Today's podcast is brought to you by Canna Provisions. Canna Provisions is an adult-use cannabis dispensary with the largest selection of cannabis products in Western Massachusetts, with locations both in Holyoke and in Lee. They offer a warm, unique shopping experience with guides rather than bud tenders. In fact, it's not just a dispensary, they're a destination. Visit cannaprovisions.com. Cannaprovisions.com. Please be over 21 and please consume responsibly. And now, Baxie's Musical Podcast.
It's Baxie's Musical Podcast.
If you were going to make a list of the 10 most iconic moments in punk rock history, the 1981 Halloween night musical appearance by the band Fear on Saturday Night Live has to be among your top 10 moments. It was an unforgettable performance that not only included the passionate support of Fear's biggest fan, the late John Belushi. That performance resulted in Fear receiving a lifetime ban from the show, immortalized forever in one of the most unforgettable musical performances in SNL history. But Fear were more than that. They were one of a handful of bands that also appeared in the film The Decline of Western Civilization by filmmaker Penelope Spheris. Fear is a band that was formed in the late 1970s that would help shape what would become one of the earliest incarnations of California hardcore. And the band's sole remaining original member is singer, guitarist, songwriter Lee Ving, who has kept Fear's relevance alive ever since. In fact, the band is releasing an extensive box set commemorating the album, which includes outtakes, demos, and various rough mixes. There's also going to be a new full-length documentary about the band, which is being put together by Jason Zink. And there's a new album of new Fear material coming out for the first time in 22 years. It's a real pleasure to speak to Lee Ving from Fear on Baxie's Musical Podcast. Hey, how are you?
Just fine, man.
It's nice to see you.
How are you? And thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I'm so excited to talk to you today. I really mean that. This record has been in my life for what seems like forever. Hey, you too. You got one too. I feel like whenever I'm having a shitty day at work, I just have to play Let's Have a War, and it's like it's so calming. It's like everything's gonna be okay. Things aren't so bad. So thank you for that.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
This is a pretty busy time for you. New album, a box set, there's a documentary on the way. There's just like so much activity all seeming to culminate at once. Is it just the 40th anniversary of the album, or were there other things going on at the same time?
Yeah, we had planned this prior to and have been working on it sort of steadily as we're going. Both the 3-record set new album and the will be released because we just got retained the rights to the first record from Warner Brothers.
I wanted to ask you about that because considering how much unreleased material there had been, that had to be kind of an interesting. I don't want to say it's a fight, but at least it's a major effort to get your own material back into your own into your own ownership.
It was pretty well laid out with papers initially, and so that simplified the process as it was time to reverse.
Let's talk about the box set here for a second here. The unreleased material was live performances. There's the original demos of Neighbors with John Belushi. There's also a handful of copies, like 25 copies, that include a radio commercial that you guys had done years ago. It almost sounds like the Willy Wonka golden ticket. Where does that radio commercial come from?
It would be hard to say. It might have been from KROQ, something that we were doing there, and that's how it got popped into our life.
It's funny. I remember the 1980s very, very well. And I remember watching all these, these talk shows, Phil Donahue and Geraldo. And back in the late 70s and early 70s, it's like the worst thing that could ever happen to your kid was for them to become a punk rocker. I mean, they could drop out of high school. They could become unemployable, but give the kids some boots and safety pins. And all of a sudden, it's time to relocate to the suburbs. I mean, the reaction to punk rock back then was so... Americans were so shocked by bands like yours and the Germs and the Dead Kennedys. I just remember parents just being so outraged by what you guys were doing that, in hindsight, it almost seems, sublime and comical. What was your thought about, those early years?
It was adventurous. That was, and things prior to that had gotten redundant and matter of course, and not super duper in any way, not a big change in any way. And it was time for some other stuff, some new stuff to be part of it. Rock and roll itself had a similar reaction when it was discovered or first presented. The adult world was shocked, and all the adjectives that you use to describe what people were demonstrating once they heard punk rock. So it was sort of a stepping off point that was a welcome relief.
What's kind of interesting about Fear in particular is, back then the whole idea was that, anyone could start a punk band with limited experience, limited knowledge of music. That was never your story. I mean, you had
No,
a long history of really knowing what you were doing. So tell me how you go from being a harmonica player in blues and jazz combos to suddenly starting Fear.
well, it was. I liked the idea of it being simplistic. That was good to have it as a mainstay, but also after being playing guitar since since the dawn of time, it was refreshing to get out there and put some things together that I wrote, and finding players who were well capable and going from there. It wasn't we weren't learning. Well, other than the fact that you're always learning, was just that it was time to apply things that I thought would be interesting to people, and it seemed to work.
What was the reaction for people back then? I mean, obviously, you're dealing with other bands that don't have the musical talent or understanding that you do, but even the crowds must have been a little bit surprised that, here's a band playing punk rock that actually knows what the hell they're doing. What was the reaction to that?
Uh, I think they were reacting to what we were presenting to them at that time, not what we had done before, what our history had been individually and as a group, or any of that. And it was time for some change, some nuance, something that people could dig their teeth into, and wasn't completely common. I thought that would be helpful, and it was. And then there were things that we did with some Dave Mustaine's band, and Guns N' Roses, and
Yeah.
the Foo Fighters, and those were, and with John Belushi getting us onto Saturday Night Live, not to mention. So all those things conspired to maybe giving us an advantage.
I remember reading the John Belushi book, the one that Bob Woodward had written, Wired. And some people take that whole story with a grain of salt, but there's a good deal of the book that deals with John and his relationship with Fear, and what a big fan he was, and getting you guys on Saturday Night Live. Tell me about that relationship with John. How did you meet him, and how did you get along with him?
We got along great. We had lots in common, and I had been a fan of his comedic routines and acting and Saturday Night Live. And before you know it, how in the world did this ever happen? There we are on Saturday Night Live. And what an amazing boost that was for us. It made things much easier in some respects.
I was actually just watching the video before we went on, and it's just the greatest piece of live television I've ever seen. It's absolute mayhem from, Donald Pleasance introducing you guys to the performance. And then you have all these kids stage diving, during the performance. Tell
And
me,
they had to go to stock footage. They had to go to some other broadcast for a moment while they were able to clear all this rabble off the stage and restore order, which was uncommon for Saturday Night Live to have to deal with anything such as that. It made the performance, the whole thing was strategically correct from what I could see, from what I was planning, and I think, and I'm virtually certain that John, who had been in some irregularities with his relationship to the show and the people therein that he was working with and for. And this really filled the bill, made it more authentic as well. And to get all these kids on the stage, I think that the brass at Saturday Night Live felt their lives were being threatened at that moment. And it was a very uncommon set of circumstances for Saturday Night Live or for any other show of that stature. And it was of amazing benefit to us. And I have to think that John, with one eyebrow raised as the camera went to him, was having the last laugh.
He had to, because my understanding in the book was it didn't just ask once or twice to get Fear on Saturday Night Live. He worked hard to get you guys on Saturday Night Live. That was like a real passion for him.
It was just unbelievably amazing gift to us to have someone with John's stature and power to be on our side and in our corner working with us. It was just great. After the performance on Saturday Night Live and the show was shut down, I think that the camera went to him, and there he was, not saying anything, with one eyebrow raised, telling the whole story. You know, I know that he felt supported and enjoyed the way things had worked out.
One of the things that was different from maybe any other performance before or since on that show was the fact that fans were brought into the studios.
Yes, to be the audience, authentic as was the music. So the whole thing was it was pretty well looked to and planned for, and it worked. And then when the TV camera went to John and he didn't say anything, he just raised one eyebrow. Now that told the whole story right there.
You had guys like Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat and Tesco B from the Meat Man and the guys from the Cro-Mags and Negative Approach. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. There weren't supposed to be that many kids that came.
That may have been it. Yeah, I think that they were not prepared for the size of the crowd, but they were pretty well determined to let everybody in who had come up, bust all the way from DC or something, took the train or however they got up there. And it worked out perfectly. It made it a moment in history that was correct from all sides.
The report's completely different no matter what source you look at. Do you remember approximately how much damage was done to the studio?
From what I could see and what I believe is the case, there was no damage to the studio. The kids were more involved in doing their slam dance than they were in, doing mischief. Other than the fact of their existence was mischief enough. And so to get them all up on stage and then have the show have to go to some kind of stock footage was just the perfect summation of the evening's events.
Just so great. And it kind of goes back to what I was talking about those talk shows and the shock of punk music at the time. By that point, Saturday Night Live had become an institution, and to see it stained by these punk rock kids diving off stage from an audience perspective, I remember watching it and also remembering that it took years before they allowed that footage to be available anywhere else. You can see it on YouTube now, but for years they never showed that episode. But nevertheless, it's so funny to me now how offensive this all was, when in fact, by the time I was old enough to go to these shows, it was like, yeah, no, that's jumping off a stage is really not that big of a deal.
Right. Compared to what else was going on in the world and what people were doing, it was just, it was what rock and roll has always done. I mean, I call it rock and roll, but, whatever you call it, it would all came from the same inspiration, the same place, the same motivation.
You guys got another pretty good boost prior to the Saturday Night Live appearance was the film The Decline of Western Civilization from Penelope Spheris. And I've talked to her about the whole trilogy. It's interesting to me now, looking back at even that film, how I'm looking at like footage of Darby Crash, who would now be 68, 69 years old had he lived. I mean, everybody in that movie is so young, and there's an innocence, and yet there's also a danger that some of the people of that time were living. Was that different in California than it was, say, like in New York or other scenes around the country? Was California that much different than anywhere else?
California was pretty laid back, as the expression goes, and had always been, and maybe always will be. But yeah, it was good because it was not unusual for there to be new things being introduced in California, because it's just it's more temperate. You don't have these freezing winters and 6 months of rain and all that kind of stuff to deal with. The weather's a little better, and there was lots, because this thing was generating for a while. There were not the big expensive places to play, but there were lots of places to play.
Right.
Smaller ones that specialized in this sort of thing. And you could see all the kids coming up on stage and that kind of thing. And there was, there's nothing, there's nothing that's not good about that idea of the kids being up on stage, the audience being up on stage with the band.
Right.
That was also a nuance. So it was cool. It was working out very well. And Penelope's film was great. It was like a who's who,
It was.
because it was developing in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and that film had the people that took part in the film. It was part of the authentic scene, the part of the spearhead, the most the newest of the bands that were doing this kind of thing, and it was going very well. The whole country had a place or two in every town you could mention that put on this kind of stuff.
It's an incredibly important film for punk music and how much it was exposed from it. Black Flag and the Circle Jerks and X. When that movie came out, did you find it easier to get booked in other parts of the country after that movie, or did it make much of
Yes,
a difference?
yeah, I'm sure that it did. It had a definite effect. If you were one of the boys club that was in that movie, it was, and as people were seeing that this is something that people will pay entrance to come and see, and it's going to be a popular kind of music, and music in general generates good money. And this looked like it was, albeit didn't look like exactly the other searching for success scenes. It looked like it was going to be successful in spite of itself.
There's a documentary that's being worked on. I don't even know how far into it they're in. Filmmaker Jason Zink is doing. In fact, the trailer is on the Fear website, fearleaving.com, called "We Destroy the Family." It looks fantastic. I mean, I don't know how much involvement you have in that, but it's like, it's a story that is a long overdue. Is to go back and look at Fear's pretty amazing career.
Yes, and to have started in Brendan Mullins' The Mask in Hollywood, in downtown Hollywood, and to have gone from that to playing every club that wanted to have something to do with this scene, and then Saturday Night Live to cap it all off at that time was just great.
Yeah.
You couldn't have planned a a better attempt at garnering a following.
Absolutely. I do want to ask you about the new record, because this is pretty exciting too. It's the first album of new music by Fear in about, I think it's almost 22 years since the last time you
Right.
guys have released something
And
new.
our 40th anniversary is quickly on the way here.
And you got a couple of original members back playing with you, and a bunch of guests too. Tell me about what people can expect with the new record.
Songs that they'd not heard before, and things that we felt were deserving of presentation. So we've included them in this, in the plans for that release, and also another release, a re-release of the first record, because that just came back to us. We just got that back from Warner Brothers.
And Bit and Philo are both involved in this one.
Spit is still playing drums. Philo lives on the East Coast, so it's more difficult for us to just like, slap together a rehearsal and play somewhere Friday night in
Right.
Hollywood as it was before. But you never can tell. Philo's a great player, and we would have him join us at any time, such as is desirable by all parties concerned.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't rule anything out. It was great knowing that we were strong players, and it continues to feel that way.
Does it feel good to go back and to play with guys that you've known for all this time? I mean, there's been a lot of members of Fear over the
Right.
years, but to go back to those original guys, I mean, that has to feel, kind of good that you can
Well,
that
we're
you can
not
do
we're
it.
not going back to anyone. We've always been with them. I mean, Spit's been the drummer the whole time. Me, the guy who does what I do, and
But yeah, but for 40 years, that's a real good long stretch with in any band.
yes, that's true.
Yeah. But you've also got, Slash and Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses, Scott Ian from Anthrax, Shooter Jennings is involved in this. Uh,
Yes.
I got to believe there had to be a line out the door for people who wanted to join you in this.
Well, those names are definitely fellow collaborators, and we of course were very happy at that interest.
When is the record coming out?
I think Christmas time, but yes, it will be we'll advertise so everybody knows.
That'll make a perfect Christmas gift.
Yes, indeed.
I want to ask you about your acting career too. I mean, you were in some pretty big films: Flashdance, Clue, Streets of Fire. How did you transition from being a musician into film?
I would have to say that it was well, the decline of Western civilization was helpful. The Saturday Night Live performance was helpful, and I had also made friends of some people in the film business. Uh, my original agent, John Burnham, and he was able to get me to places where they were doing that sort of thing, film work, and being that there was all this buzz from this punk rock band that we have, it gave me a desirability, I think, to the casting world to see what this was all about. And as per those appointments came, after we had actually been in a film, albeit a documentary, there may have been some curiosity for all that, which I welcomed. And of course, Flashdance was a big deal, and Clue
Yeah.
was a big deal, and that they all were. And I look forward to more of that as time goes on here.
I remember Clue in particular because the cast of that movie was unbelievable, and here you are as really in a way kind of the central figure. You're Mr. Body. You're the guy that everyone's trying to
Yes,
figure out.
that was the reason, the whole reason for the story.
Yeah, and what's great about it is you played a great, intimidating, kind of sleazy guy. I think you
Yes.
you knocked it out of the park on that one.
Oh, thank you.
So again, the box set is coming out, the 40th anniversary box set, the new record, the documentary, "We Destroy the Family." This. If you're a Fear fan, there's so much stuff to look forward to. Lee, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate the time, and I have been a big fan since since you were kicked off of Saturday Night Live. It's still one of the best things I've ever seen on television.
Oh, very cool. I wanted to say hello to and to thank Jason Zink for being the director of our documentary about Fear.
It looks fantastic. I'm really excited to see it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's the reaction that we're looking for.
Yeah, no, I watch a lot of documentaries as I've been doing this podcast over the last couple of years, and every time I see one, I'm
Right.
going, I got to see that one. And this is one of those documentaries I just can't wait for.
Baxie, I want to thank you for the help that you have been in that regard. Each of these things that we get to do assists all the other things in bringing it along. It seems to work that way. Thank you today for this interview that we did.
You're very welcome, and I appreciate the time, Lee. Thank you so much.
You betcha, brother. Talk to you soon.
You bet.
Take care.
You can pre-order the new 40th anniversary box set of The Record by Fear on May 16th. It's expected to be out and shipped by December, plus the new album and the documentary, We Destroy the Family, all coming out later this year. Thanks again for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Today's podcast, again, brought to you by Canna Provisions in Holyoke and Lee, Massachusetts. Check them out at cannaprovisions.com. And if you like the show, I'd love to hear about it. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. Thank you so much for listening to Baxie's Musical Podcast.